emotionally.
Amazing. Γεια σου, Apostole. How are you doing?
Hi, guys. Hi, Panagiotis. Hi, Niko. Panos.
Γεια σου, Apostolos.
Hi, Panos. Γεια σου, Panos. Nick, how's everything going in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so similar with Niko, you know, life continues. Here it's a semi-lockdown, so similar to Athens, but you don't need to send an SMS, so you can always go out. We have really sunny weather these days, which is nice. So you see people out, but still people keep the social distancing. And then, yeah, portfolio-wise, something similar with Niko. So companies doing phenomenally well out of nowhere, where you didn't expect it. So yeah, definitely, I would say an emotional roller coaster every day.
Yeah. We are still waiting. And by the way, for those who weren't online, we forgot to launch the practice run of the webinar. So we're live. The warm-up is live. It's okay. We're still learning Zoom. Our knowledge of Zoom is as exponential as its value, I don't know, and its growth.
In the stock market, yeah.
We're becoming experts. We had to become experts in a few days. We're still waiting for the Deputy Minister and Marco Veremis. I think that it's going to be a really interesting conversation, having all of these different insights, local funds, regional funds, international investors, even the government, and see how the investment plans, how the planning and the strategy is changing, and how you're experiencing the crisis within your portfolio. I think this is the most important thing for our audience, which is 99% entrepreneurs and a few other people. We're already at 50 people watching. I think we can wait for a couple of more minutes.
Pano, I like your background. Is it like a real one or virtual one? What is it?
No, it's a real one.
Oh, nice. You're at the office. Nice.
I came at the office for this session. It's because of the cool background. I come here to have a webinar here. My house is. I also like your background, though.
You're very kind. Yeah, that's a friend of ours who loves surfing. He's an artist, and every single painting he makes, he basically, uses his experience from surfing. And then you can see a little bit of a Greek corner here. We have a lot of Greek masticha liqueur. One is from a startup from New York. The other one is Yannis. Have a lot of money over there, money, like the olive oil. And then we have the bridge behind us. So, yeah.
Yeah.
The people are going to work today. The lockdown is becoming unbearable, perhaps.
Yeah. Same here. I'm not sure if Apostole or Panos, but I get the sense that cars are doubling or tripling. Hello, Mr. Minister. How are you doing?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And we're already live, just because we forgot to set up a practice run on Zoom. And we're still waiting for Marcos, who's usually not late.
There's a lot of internet traffic nowadays.
Yeah. It's terrible. The landline, the telephones, they're always crashing. It's terrible. I guess I'm gonna text him, but we'll start.
We can start, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining. Just to give you an introduction, my name is Panagiotis. I'm the Managing Director of Endeavor Greece. A lot of our companies are experiencing, they started the year in a completely different way that they're now managing it. And we've been getting a lot of requests for support, for introductions, and for mentoring, and of all of this kind of different things that we can do for them as an organization. And of course, a lot of them were either planning to start fundraising or in the middle of fundraising, or they definitely need to try to change their plans going forward. So we thought, okay, let's go to the experts and let's ask the top. Anna, this is one of our team members.
It's a test.
Sorry for that. So let's go to Greeks who are investing all around the world, and let's ask them how their view and how are they seeing this crisis unraveling. And of course, we asked for Mr. Tsakiris, Deputy Minister of Development and Investments, to join, because I think this is also, given the fact that we have 3 equity funds here, I think that it's also interesting to have a government's perspective and see if in a government, in an institutional way, there's things going to change going forward. So thank you all for joining. We have Niko, we have on alphabetical order, we have Apostolos Apostolakis, partner and co-founder of Friends for Friends, Niko Bonatsos, Managing Director of General Catalyst, and Nick Kalliagkopoulos, Principal at Prime Ventures, Panos Papadopoulos, Partner at Marathon Venture Capital, the Deputy Minister, Yannis Tsakiris, and Marco Veremis, who will join us shortly. I'd like to start with Deputy Minister, if I'm allowed. I would like to start with the fund managers and get a little bit of your perspective. How you're seeing things going? How are you seeing your portfolio companies managing the situation? And what's your main takeaway so far from the crisis? And I'd like to start from Niko Bonatsos and Nick Kalliagkopoulos, just to go from the international perspective to the more regional one. Niko?
Yeah, sure. Happy to start. Excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Great to see you and meet you all. I would say it's a very fluid situation, because that's not an experience or a crisis that you can modulate based on past experiences, at least during our lifetimes. It's a very fluid situation, and as parts of the economy have been shut down, or in certain instances slowly parts of the economy are getting to open up, I would say we are seeing our founders manage it week by week. And every week there's new information that's coming in. So they take that into consideration, and in a sense with their board, they're making decisions. But at a high level, the advice we've given to our portfolio companies is that cash is king or queen, and they should have runway for a couple of years, and if possible, ideally longer. So if they need to make changes right now, now's the time, because tomorrow it's going to be worse time. So like today is a better day to make that decision to cut costs than tomorrow. Secondly, we are also working very closely with portfolio companies to identify new opportunities that have come up, because a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And for their respective sector, there may be really sweet opportunities, either to snap up other competitors or go after a customer segment that finally now is opening up. So that's something, that we are doing. And then if they are in a sector where things are blowing up, now is a great time to fundraise, because still investors are placing some bets. And from my vantage point, at the Series A, seed, early B stages, at least here, in the US, the valuations have not shifted much for companies that have momentum, going after big markets in sectors that are doing well. Where things are trickier or with later stage companies where growth investors have seen the public equities market shift quite a bit. There's a lot of uncertainty. So these rounds get delayed, not happening, term sheets get pulled or renegotiated, have structure, all this good and bad stuff that we have not seen, for over a decade now. Maybe I stop here.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it would be also interesting to hear your thoughts, all of you. What are your suggestions and what are the advices you give to your entrepreneurs who are either in industries that are now facing tremendous pressure or on the other side, they're growing rapidly. Nick, how are things in the European environment?
Let's see. So I completely agree with Niko. This is a very unique situation for everyone. So we're all preparing for a financial crisis, but it's not yet a financial crisis. It's a health crisis, and it has it's something that nobody has experienced before. The entire economy worldwide, everywhere shutting down, borders closing, people not being able to move, which of course, certain parts of the economy and certain companies, this affects them a lot. Companies that are dependent on face-to-face interaction. As a fund, we are more on the pessimistic rather than the optimistic side, to be honest. So the consensus is that we expect the corona will not go away soon. Although we hope for a V-shaped recovery, we prepare for a much longer recession and a much longer downturn. It really depends per sector. Some companies are doing exceptionally well. Companies on remote health are doing exceptionally well, or food delivery, we see really good results. Other companies that are in the hardest hit sectors, like travel, we urge CEOs to completely change mindset, to go to survival mode, to prepare for the worst. Cash is king, and our view is that it's better to be pessimistic and be proven wrong than to be too optimistic, as if you're too optimistic and you're wrong, it might cost you the company. So our advice is, take tough measures as early as possible, preserve cash, get years of cash runway. When we look at the fundraising environment, we invest in the growth stage and we already see the impact. We see term sheets being pulled out. We see companies that were a minute before signing, suddenly the investors call and say, sorry, situation changed. We see terms to start become harsher. And we expect this will continue. So we expect, even when the health crisis is managed, we do expect that we're going to enter a financial recession. And then founders need to adapt, because for the past few years, capital was easy. But we don't expect this anymore. And for sure, it's going to be different in the seed and the Series A stages. But we think that in Series B, Series C, it will take quite some time before the market starts again functioning properly.
Thank you so much. Apostolos?
Well, obviously things are very difficult, but I just think there are two disruptions that we need to take into account here. I mean, there is the immediate effect of the lockdown that is disrupting many companies to a very high extent, and then there is a recession that will follow and will ensue for a year or maybe a bit longer. I think startups are more easier adapting to a recession. So that's why I'm a bit more optimistic. After we go through this first phase that is really like a shock to the demand for many companies, then the recession, I think these startups can handle if there is demand. We're going with startups, we're going for a smaller market share of a pie. We've seen it, we've all been through crises, especially as Greeks, and we've seen startups thrive in the crisis, in a recessionary environment. So I am optimistic after this disruption we go through this disruption. In terms of advice, I mean, I don't want to repeat what the guy said, and I'm on the same page, obviously. One more thing is just that it's a good opportunity to do a sanity check on the culture, on the team, see who you can count as a founder, see who you can count on. I mean, many companies are going through difficult times. And it's great to see there is a culture and alignment in the team, and build also the sense of urgency and the sense of purpose around those tough times. Great companies will be built in this period.
Okay. Panos?
Hi from me as well. First of all, I'd like to wish courage to all the founders being here. It's going to be tough times ahead. So yeah, I echo the opinions that all the other fund managers said before me. Likewise, I think it is going to be like a longer recession ahead of us. However, you know, there are things on the positive side for startups. Like we see an acceleration of digitization. So, you know, there is this meme, you know, what was like the fastest acceleration for digitization? It was like CTO, CDO, or COVID. So there are more opportunities for efficient companies. I think, you know, the fact that a lot of the startups we are dealing with and everybody in the Ecofund portfolio, they have a base in Greece that's much lower cost than the ones, let's say, in San Francisco, can have much more runway. And we already see it in several of our portfolio companies that they have like 2 years or 3 years of runway. So that's going to be a competitive advantage because we're going to see salary compression, especially in the Bay Area, London, and the more expensive places. But if you're already here and you have a lower base, you are way more cost efficient. And from conversations I'm currently having with international investors, they really love that. Like, you know, it might be as well more likely that they're going to invest in a company, let's say in Greece with a low burn rate, but a good growth rate as well, right? Let's not forget growth rate, than maybe something in the United States where, you know, the cost might be 5 times bigger. Of course, there's still a lot of money in the large funds, but the bar is way higher. So we have acceleration of digitization. And also this is a waking up call to be more efficient in company structure, to improve your culture, stop having fat in any kind of way, like, you know, super expensive salaries or, you know, taking lots of meetings to jump to a decision. And that also is being reflected on the organization on the other side. So now we can see large organizations, even banks, where people can work from Zoom, from home, and they have to take decisions a very different way. They are not there yet, but now we live this acceleration of history where actually even largest corporations are going to adopt, you know, some of the tooling and the methodologies that we see in smaller companies. And after, you know, people have been through that, maybe there's no way back to the way we run the companies in the past, even like in an office space. So definitely there's a lot of opportunity for startups here. I think the most obvious is not going to be innovation because in a recession, nobody innovates. Everybody tries to cut budget. So especially for software companies, replacing budget by being more efficient is going to be like killer. And if you have like a very healthy burn rate in Greece, I mean, we have seen companies across our companies, we don't see any personnel reduction in Greece. They may be doing it in London or United States. So far, we're lucky nobody has done, but most probably they're not going to cut the Greek jobs. So you'll be able to offer as good service if you are a good product maker at a much better cost. So that's going to be really make you much more competitive in the coming months.
Thank you for that. Marco, how about you? You're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, a nice kind of line I read somewhere was that we're shifting from a time of unicorns to a time of for camels, you know, and you know that has been absent for the past decade because we've had the longest bull market in history, right? So I think the culture of startups and the culture of tech firms has been very far away from the ethos of cash management, you know, attention to detail, get rid of people who are not exceptionally good. And generally, this is definitely going to come back. And I think it's a good thing that it's going to come back because, to be frank, companies that want long-term sustainability will face crisis, whether it's COVID or it's 9/11 or, you know, who knows what the next one is. So I think, you know, I'm trying to paint a positive picture around a negative event, but I think that this is a time that at least we're telling our portfolio companies, guys, now it's for real. You know, you really need to change the way you look at cash, the way you look at runway, the way you look at how much people are contributing in the team. And I think it's generally a good thing. The second thing I would say is I think founders need to be very clear that with the exception of a few funds that are either newer or have done so well and willing to take risk in the next 6 to 8 months, most funds will not be investing so much. I mean, the main theme in the markets at the moment is refinancing and private loans, private debt. Okay, these are, we're shifting away from equity to these kinds of instruments. So I think everyone should be clear that that's where the action is. Having said that, there's going to be quite a bit of action on that. So there might not be that much action on the VC space, but there will be action in terms of debt instruments, more, maybe for even smaller amounts than they used to be. I think, there's going to be action on that. And I would advise every founder to keep their eyes open for these kinds of opportunities, because they are coming up day by day. So that's the second point, that the instruments for the time being might change, but the money will still be there in various ways, but under stricter conditions. And the third and final thing I would say is at the moment, Greece and generally the kinds of companies that belong to our portfolios do have an advantage, assuming they have a healthy runway, which is that they can very easily change course. I think Panos referred to that as well. These crises create opportunities as much as they create carnage, right? And usually the big companies are big ships that cannot easily turn, right? The small ships can navigate much faster, make changes, even change business plans, and capture a lot of these opportunities fast. Those who can do that can come out actually very favorably out of this. And I think the fact that, again, as Panos said, the cost basis in Greece is very reasonable, even sort of reinforces this point that you can travel light, you can travel fast, and you can achieve a lot of things over the next year. And do bear in mind this sense of urgency. This opportunity will not be around for long. If you want to have an opportunity against the Goliaths, this is the time. The next year is probably the time frame you have before the big guys restructure. They are changing the way they work. They've got the consultants in, and they're quite busy doing that. So that gives us a lot of time, us smaller guys, to take some of their territory.
Thank you, Marco. And with that, having heard from the three equity fund managers here, I would like to take it to Mr. Tsakiris and ask you, Mr. Minister, how are you seeing the situation right now? How is the government viewing this crisis as opposed to its investment plan, and how are you seeing the equity fund initiative being affected because of Corona?
Thank you. First of all, let me tell you that what we are going through is something that we haven't seen before. I mean, it's the first time that such a shock, and it's an external shock, is affecting the global economy has never been seen, at least from our generation. Definitely the shock is going to be short. Whatever it happens, the vaccine or the treatment for the coronavirus is going to be found. So at a certain point, things will come back in normal. And in normal. And when I say short, and definitely, I guess it will be less than 1 year. Nevertheless, when we will wake up again, I think the world will be completely different. And this you can even see it here in Greece. When it comes to the, let's say, digitization of the economy, we will have done progress in Greece that under normal circumstances would have taken 2-3 years to happen. And several other things that will have changed completely. The way that we are conducting, and I'm talking about the majority, the business, the way we're doing the meetings. I'm sure that there will be several people that they will continue, let's say, doing using Zoom or webcasts, WebEx, etc. So things will be different. Now, when it comes to the Greek economy was recovering for a long crisis and is getting into a new one, very severe, with unpredicted results. All sectors has been affected, as in every other country, and we really don't know what, let's say, will be the outcome in terms of the overall market conditions. There are few sectors and some companies that obviously they are benefiting, but the majority of companies are suffering. So what we have done as a government, first of all, I guess you have noticed that when it comes to the protection of the public, the health issues, etc., we have done extremely well. When it comes to the economy and the market, our intention was for the period that crisis is developing to keep companies, to keep markets in a type of hibernation mode, so that when normality comes back, those companies to be more easily, let's say, to resume operations, to be active again, and so on and so forth. So for that reason, we have introduced horizontal measures. We haven't gone to specific sectors. We have introduced interest rate subsidies. We have introduced support, working capital support to self-employed. We are introducing a guarantee scheme for new working capital loans. But of course, as you know, and as I said before, given that Greece was coming out from a more than 10-year crisis, the resources are not so many. So we have to do really to do more with less. And this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to exhaust all the leverage factors that we can find in financial instruments. We try to customize our products so that as many people, as many entrepreneurs as possible to benefit from them, so that to be kept in this hibernation mode. When it comes to equifund, and in general, I would say funds and companies that have been financed through venture capital funds, there we are considering now, as we feel that the crisis is going away gradually, now we start considering how we can support specifically this market. We are discussing with stakeholders. We have some ideas on the table. I think soon we will have a plan that we can with which we can help. On the other hand, and taking out the hat of the minister, obviously for the entrepreneurship world and the venture capital world, I think I would be fully aligned with what Marco said, and I would see this as a great opportunity. And I think we have to face it and treat it as a great opportunity, and really convert this threat into real opportunity and real results. As I said, it will be, the next day it will be a completely different world. For this reason, that startups that at least have the backup of a fund manager, so a solid investor, they might, let's say, burn a bit more cash, but they have the ability very quickly to change their business model because they have the resources and turn into a more profitable way of doing business, even to another sector, so another business model, another revenue model, or something, let's say, that will be by far more profitable in the new day ahead of us. When it comes to the fund managers, again, they're by far more protected than entrepreneurs because they have the portfolio protection, which means that statistically, if in particular if they're generalist fund managers, some of the portfolio companies, they will either it will be benefited directly from the crisis, or they could change their business model very quickly, so to benefit in the near future significantly of the changing market conditions. So all in all, I would say that being a fund manager, particularly when it comes to the investment period and the vis-a-vis the portfolio, is something that might create big opportunities. Of course, on the other hand, some limited partners, some fund investors might default, and I think we have to face it. I hope that this will not happen in the Greek funds, and limited partners will continue to honor the drawdowns. But also we are trying to find ways to address this potential issue. We are, of course, as a state, we are limited with several restrictions, state aid restrictions, and so on and so forth. So we are trying hard really to find a way around all those restrictions and support this ecosystem of equity investments in Greece.
Thank you so much. Very, very insightful and a lot of information here. I think a lot of the founders listening and fund managers learned a little bit more about your views. With that said, and I'm hearing a lot of positive views about the crisis house being an opportunity, and I'm wondering how much this is a threat to some of the companies. And I'm not, I mean, I would be, I don't know, would love to hear your thoughts on how much of what is the percentage of your portfolio that it's in more dangerous, let's say, but I think that it's more valuable for our audience to hear how are you stepping in, how are you helping them, and what we've seen so far working. And if, let's say, the audience was was part of your portfolio, what would you advise them during this crisis? A lot of them, I'm sure, are in hot waters right now. So, Niko, I'm sure you have some good stories already from the board meetings.
Sure. So it starts with the personal aspect, what Apostolos was alluding before, because it's hard for a lot of people, founders and investors, including me. Over the last decade or so, we never had to take into account the macroeconomic environment, and now this is a huge risk that's changing everything. So if you're a founder of a company that you've never operated in such an environment, you don't know how to model it. Also, if you're a founder of a company that has never had a work from home culture or a distributed team, that's another shock, because pretty much overnight you have to deal with that. If you also have kids and your spouse is working, you're saints. So like at a personal level, that's where we first and foremost need to be. We need to be good genuine listeners, good thought partners, and reasonable problem solvers. And our job is to try also to be perhaps a little bit more pessimistic than what the founders and great CEOs are, who are always enthusiastic, optimistic, that can change the world, because, times are different now. So making sure that they can have enough runway to realize these dreams, rally the troops, and get us to the Holy Land is our job. So where it's tricky is when other VC babies or board members who haven't experienced the macroeconomic crisis are in the mix. And there are discussions in the boardroom that don't conclude that the company may need to do a burn reduction, which is almost universally the case. So that's where, a lot of the emotional aggravation is coming through. But I think now that we've been operating in this closed economy situation for 6-7 weeks or longer, in some other countries, most of the companies have ended up taking the right steps, or every week taking into account the new data to make that decision. So our job is to be there with the founders, listen to them, advise them to make some of the right steps so they can have the time to realize the dreams. Beyond that, it's also important to take care of all the people that have to go and make sure that they're taken care of. Here in the US, unfortunately, there's no universal health insurance. And with all the millions of people who are unemployed, it's a tricky job market. So what can the employer do to make sure they can have perhaps an easier on-ramp in this new environment? That's something that's top of mind. Can we help them join other portfolio companies of ours? That's an initiative that we have. And then I'm very fortunate to be part of a group that has an incredible roster of venture capitalists. So what we are doing is, for example, my partner Ken Chenault, who's the CEO of Amex during 9/11 and the financial crisis, he's doing webinars like this with all of our portfolio companies. So we have individuals on our team who have different perspectives and can share knowledge with the founders that we work with.
Amazing. I'm trying to find what you said about sharing talent and having to let people go. Doesn't mean that they're not talented. You just have to let them go, and they're still very attractive and probably an opportunity also. One of our portfolio companies and one of the Greece's biggest success, Workable, just launched a similar initiative where they're connecting it's an online recruitment company. So they're connecting their customers, so one can share with another the talented people that they have to let go, which is, I find it awesome. Nick, how about you? What have you seen working, and what have you been helpful to your portfolio?
Yeah, so I agree a lot with Niko. This is a period that's very hard for founders. Suddenly the whole world is collapsing with something that was completely outside of their hands. Some of them might be lucky and might have been very well capitalized. Others might have been, very close to the end of cash because a new funding round was there. They need to make tough choices. And it's much easier to make a tough choice on a boardroom or by email, approve some cost cutting, and it's completely different being the CEO and being the founder and implementing this with the people that have trusted you, with the people that you've worked. We try to be there for founders. We try to support, not always successfully. There is a fine line, which sometimes, unfortunately and unintentionally, also VCs pass and show less empathy than they should, or at least we try to show that empathy because we understand it's very hard. But we need to be on the pessimistic side. We need to be the people that will challenge, what if it goes even worse? How can we survive? Because cash is king. So we will be suggesting, reviewing every cost line, questioning everything, analyzing the ROI of every euro spent today versus that euro being spent 6 months from now. Other than that, yeah, we have some extra team members on our team. So we took the decision that at least for the immediate period, we will focus almost exclusively on existing portfolio. We will be making new investments, but in this period of time, we want to make sure that we focus on the existing portfolio, which means that there are some of our team members that are not sitting on boards and therefore have a bit more free time than other of us. And we offer the support to companies on non-business critical, but still time-consuming tasks if they can, and if founders believe that this could be of help, we try to connect founders and management teams with professional services people or lawyers for specific questions in many countries. We try to help as much as we can.
Well, that was my next question. How's your strategy changing going forward? I mean, we're getting a lot of questions, especially from people who are fundraising right now and aiming mostly, I'm assuming, to the local fund managers. How much of your time is going to be spent on supporting your existing portfolio rather than making new investments? And how is it? Do you see any shift on your focus and on your strategy? I would love to hear everyone's thought on that. But Apostolos, is your strategy shifting at all? Are you rethinking the plan?
Well, certainly we're spending much time supporting the founders, and especially in those situations, this is very important, especially for companies who have been there and you know that they can pull it through. That doesn't mean that we are not going to do. We have to and we want to do another 4 or 5 investments. Answering specifically your question, in the next 9 months, we have the capital allocated for new investments. So we will do that, and we will support the existing companies as well. In terms of our focus, I mean, we are founder-driven as an early-stage investor. So it's not that we focus on specific industries just because, okay, all the industries are becoming more digitized. If there's an amazing founder who is solving a clear problem in a big market that has the feasibility, scalability, the typical stuff that the VC looks, we're going to look at it. Just a quick point on how we support the founders. Echoing what Niko said before, which is exactly what I was alluding to, it is about being there. It is about fighting hard alongside the founder. For me, it's like reliving my past, because as an entrepreneur, I've been in that situation before. I've been in the fight trying for survival, and the entrepreneur, the founder, needs to feel that he's on the same page with his investor. We're not there to monitor. We're there to be helpful, and this is very important. And being helpful means transferring the know-how or sharing any insights from similar situations we've been through, or practically connecting and doing the fundraising, supporting him. Fundraising is probably the most difficult thing to do right now. Even promising startups, they find it difficult to fundraise. So we can, as investors, we can actually be supported by investing, or we can help them connect with other investors, selling their story and creating conviction, because every investor is getting risk averse and they think that this is going to last forever. So our job as investors is like really be there and fight hard for those guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Apostle. How about you, Panos? It's a double question about what have you seen working and having an impact on your portfolio, and how's your strategy looking forward in the next months?
Yeah. So what we have seen, looking, of course, as every fund in the world, we are changing, the allocation for the reserves. So, we want to have more in order to support existing portfolios. May have done it a couple of times already, writing some small checks just to keep, the lights open till, there's more clarity of what's going on. It's a pendulum right now because, investors can say, oh yeah, there's COVID. So yeah, no more terms, no more money. Founders can claim, oh, we will be doing great if there was no COVID. So it's a bit more difficult right now to read between the lines. So it's all about like continuing the existing conviction you might have prior to COVID. But of course, you understand the situation that is extremely hard for founders. And us from the portfolio manager investing, talking about the difficulties that founders face, we're really starting far in a way, right? It's very, very different when you have people and you have to pay next month, make sure you can have everything in place from being on where we sit, right? So founders right now are heroes. And the ones that actually, do the hard job of maintaining the job. So kudos to everyone who's being in the battle right now. Now, from we are still going to invest, of course. what is changing for us, and I think it changes for everyone around the world, is that along with product innovation, you also have to master your go-to-market. If what you did relied on expensive salesmen, trips, and conferences, that's not going to work. If you wanted to start with upfront big contracts, that's not going to work either. So you need to be able to master what some funds have been claiming for some time now, called product-led growth, which means let everyone try your product, get them hooked, land them for a small contract, and then grow with a customer. So we want to see more of those. You know, of course, there are existing companies that they want to do more renewals in existing enterprise accounts, which is of course a winning strategy for everyone. But when it comes to new companies, you know, we have to see, you know, especially, you know, if they're early, you know, and they're still building the product, how long it's going to take? You know, what is the timeline? Do we think by when the money runs out, there will be money for them in the market, or they're still going to be perceived as exotic? So that's something you have to take into consideration. And, you know, I'm afraid that, you know, some really deep innovation is going to be hit because, you know, there's no clear path to staying alive, if even, you know, with a seed fund. And of course, there are always exceptions, right? Yeah, right founders always have a great future in front of them. But when it comes to, let's say, to everything else, more kind of SaaS of services and so on, now it's time for founders to also think about the go-to-market as part of the product versus something you figure out along the way. We really want to see that someone has a path to market, a path to some revenues, something to keep him, and which is not super expensive, and it didn't involve things that I mentioned that were expensive or maybe not very functioning right now.
Perfect, thank you. Marco.
In terms of what we're doing at the moment, the first thing we're doing is just spending a lot of time with the founders that want to spend time with us, because we do have certain founders that are perfectly capable of taking care of their own. But those who do seek help, we end up spending a lot of time with them. And that, I think, is the main thing we're doing, just spending like 5 or 6 times more time with the founders than we did before COVID. So that is definitely one big change. Now, because I've had the experience of 2 companies in my career, let's say, before I became an investor, one was super well capitalized, Persado, and the other was not at all capitalized, Upstream, sort of was completely faced death probably 4 or 5 times in its life, had to go through major cut down, you know, periods, very much a situation resembling what is going on now. You know, I mean, I have a view on both worlds in some ways, what it looks like to have, you know, 30 million in the bank and what it looks like to have mortgaged your own house to save your company. And, you know, my experience is that right now, there will unfortunately be a certain amount of natural selection in the next 2 years, where the kind of entrepreneurs that can adjust to this mentality of operating more like commandos and who thrive in these kinds of conditions and look at it in a positive way, like commandos come into their own under severe or adverse warfare, right? And they capture a lot more territory under those conditions than normal soldiers, right? So I'm afraid to say that, you know, the conditions have changed for sure. Last week was the first week since 2008 when there was no financial sort of event in terms of capital raise or IPO or M&A below over 1 billion, not a single one. There's not been a single week since 2008 where that has happened until last week. Okay, so you know, the conditions have changed. What we're trying to do is mentor them and teach them the ways as much as we can of operating in this new environment. What are the components? The first component is very much psychological, is what Niko said and what Apostolos said. You know, you have to prepare for battle. You have to be prepared to sacrifice. You have to be prepared to take pain in losing people, which is for me the single hardest thing an entrepreneur will experience in his career. I would argue it's even worse than losing everything, right? You know, firing someone for me is still the worst thing. The other thing is, you know, just getting accustomed to very, very, very detailed cash management, like checking your bank account and receivables chasing for everything that needs to be collected like you are an accountant yourself. There are certain skills that come with this kind of warfare conditions that we're trying to teach our founders. So we're bringing in, as Niko said, experts. Some of them are big names. Others are just people who've done that, like accountants. An example, the person who chases in every company the people who owe money is someone who right now is a vital source of information, and is not a very important person like a month ago. And now this kind of person has a very valuable skill to teach, right? So the first thing is just teaching. The second thing is obviously we're trying to extend money where it's necessary, but I have to be very honest with you all that we extend money where we think there's an opportunity, right? I mean, we extend money where we think that actually we're getting a good deal here. These people would normally be raising funds from some, super American or UK VC, and now they can't get it. So it's a great opportunity for us to put more money into a company that eventually will do really well. But we're not really putting money for charity, to be perfectly honest. We're not saving companies that we think cannot save themselves. So the second thing we're doing is we are putting money into the mix. And the third thing we're doing is, I think, socializing, like we're doing now, founders between them, founders with founders that might be a lot older, that have come back into fashion now. Because, I think about a month ago or 2 months ago, no one was interested to talk to like a 60, 70-year-old person who's, failed 4 times and created businesses under duress, etc. Now, these kinds of old timers are very, very useful people to talk to our founders because they've been there and done that in the past. So I think these are the 3 elements. The first is just building the skills and, of course, the morale. The second is giving them money. The third is essentially socializing with the right kind of people that a lot of our founders avoided socializing because, let's be frank, I think we've socialized between us a lot. We need to socialize beyond our comfort zone right now, right? With people we didn't use to socialize, like the accountant, like the old-time businessman, that kind of thing. So, that's what we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Mr. Tsakiris, before going to you, I would love to hear also Niko Bonatsos' view on how is your strategy, how is General Catalyst changing the plans?
Sure. So we're in a fortunate position because we announced our newest set of funds, $2.3 billion a few weeks ago. So we're well capitalized to do what Marco just alluded, like to really hopefully make the right investments and create a lot of wealth for LPs that are mostly endowments and nonprofits. So we're in a good position to ride the new wave. In terms of our strategy at the seed and early stage, like Series A, because you have a 7-8 year horizon, not much has changed in terms of our investing pace. What I would say, though, is that we're looking for companies that have some evidence of product market fit. Whereas, before 3 months ago, you would do a pre-launch Series A, and now you have second thoughts about it. In terms of growth, growth investing, we're more measured than before. And then in terms of really late stage investing, it's a great time now to get into very high quality opportunities that before were valued in the stratosphere, get some of the meetings that were scheduled months later in the year to happen right now, because there are marquee assets that are getting impacted in travel, SMB. These are companies that will be around, but now they're getting priced at the right valuation. So that's what's happening in terms of investing. Then the other thing we're doing is we're actively exploring 5 themes. The 2 are in sectors that are impacted, SMB and travel, because they're good opportunities that are gonna get surfaced over there, both at the very early stage as well as late stage. And these are sectors that are now fully pretty much shut down. And then the other 3 are healthcare, especially telehealth, and here in the US, healthcare is a freaking mess. So this crisis is going to be a great opportunity, like catalyst for change. So healthcare is one. The second one is media, because now when the whole world is working from home or just hanging out or not commuting, new behaviors get created or new habits get cemented. So that's a very interesting space. Ad budgets are getting slashed down, so new business models need to pop up. And then the last one, probably the most exciting one, is the future of work thing. I do believe what the minister said, a number of people are not going to be as eager to go to home, go to work after this is over. And if each one of us works from home 1 day a week, then 0 days a week before, that's a huge change. So what is the tool set that is going to be required to support this new now mainstream behavior, because the future is getting accelerated. And also another area we're really interested in making investments right now is in products and services that are helping unemployed, underemployed, all those folks come back into the labor market as the economy starts to pick up. Because we're talking about tens of millions of people all over the world.
Amazing.
That's
Thank
it.
you so much. Mr. Tsakiris, I've had the opportunity a couple of times to hear your plans and the many things that you were planning for the investment area in Greece. And I'm wondering if this has changed because of the crisis. The investment bank and accelerators and many other initiatives that you were planning on launching, which sounded great to me. And I was wondering if anything has changed. And yes, and then I will follow up with another question.
Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, this crisis came just on the moments when we were starting to rolling out new products from the Hellenic Development Bank. About 1 month and a half ago, we have announced that we are going to create an equity instrument for energy. As you said, we have discussed and we have designed an accelerator program. So all this we have, unfortunately, let's say, to push them back for, I hope, few months. So planning hasn't changed, only has been postponed. We might redesign some products depending on the needs of the market after the crisis. But in general, there is a delay, unfortunate delay, but things will continue, let's say, more or less as planned. I just wanted to, again, to get out the hat of Deputy Minister. I would say that I think it's a great time for fundraising. Maybe not today, but in a very short time. First of all, because liquidity has not disappeared in the market. Simply, liquidity is not circulating, given that it's a global shock. So sooner or later it will start to circulate again in a market with new conditions, new players, let's say, new priorities. So I think that investors, that they will invest in funds right after the crisis, to the right funds, they will have by far more, I guess, opportunities to have a decent return.
Thank you for that. And one last question: having exposure to many countries as an organization, we're present in 40 countries. We are seeing a lot of different examples and different initiatives, different efforts to support the startup ecosystem and the early stage companies in each country. It seems that there's a focus in many countries. It's a big focus. Are you exploring any different specific initiatives supporting startups? Are you open to suggestions? How is this thing going?
As I said also at the beginning, we are looking some potential measures to support, first of all, the venture capital ecosystem, because it's something that it has been built with a lot of effort, and it's a pity, let's say, to waste it. But also on the startup area, together with Deputy Minister Dimas, and we will try to put something, let's say, in place. As I said at the beginning, it's unfortunately resources are not unlimited that we have. And I believe that we have to, as I said, to do more with less. And that's why we went, for the time being, into horizontal measures, including all the companies when it comes to interest rate subsidy, including all self-employed. Either it's somebody that is, let's say, creating a software in his garage, or somebody that let's say, he's operating a kiosk. We cannot afford to exclude anybody out of this. But we think that from now on, and also as European tools are developing, don't forget that the EIB is pursuing a 25 billion guarantee fund. European Investment Fund will be part of it, so there's going to be a lot of support towards existing venture capital teams and startups. So we are also aligning with them and looking into more, let's say, sector or state-specific measures. But it needs sometimes to mature.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. We are exactly 60 minutes in, and I know that some of you have asked us not to surpass this. Your schedule is tight. So if you don't have any last comments, personally, I tried my best to answer as many questions as possible. There are a lot of them. We had a really good participation in terms of numbers and also engagement. Exciting thing. We will follow up, and we like to follow up after a webinar with the questions and try to get them answered offline and then share them with the audience. So we will follow up. We will not leave the questions unanswered, and we'll do our best to keep up the conversation with the audience. If you don't have any last comments, I'd like to thank you all for your participation. Mr. Deputy Minister, guys, thank you so much for joining. Very insightful discussion. Thank you so much for dedicating your time in this and sharing your thoughts with our audience.
Thank you, Panagiotis.
Thank you. Have a great night and stay safe.
Thank you.